hopefully you can intuit as early as possible in your life that emotional mastery, the development of emotional mastery, is going to pay dividends for the rest of your life if you can develop it. And the faster you can develop it, the better. But also you should see that developing emotional mastery is difficult. You can't master your emotions overnight or even in a year. This requires a lot of deep introspection work, mindfulness work, dealing with your shadow stuff, dealing and facing fear and anger and jealousy, confronting these in an honest way, journaling about them, reading about how emotions work. This is a whole project. This project can take you 10, 20 years of your life. Perhaps practicing different methods like the Sedona method, letting go of emotions. Just even learning how to label your emotions. For example, when you're angry, learning to label, oh, that's anger. And when you're afraid, oh, that's fear. And when you're jealous, oh, that's jealousy. And when you're feeling guilty, oh, that's guilt. And then you can research and learn different coping mechanisms and different sorts of strategies for how to jujitsu with those different kinds of emotions. So like when you're angry, you can maybe learn the strategy of like, okay, let me just take a few deep breaths, pause and take a few deep breaths. Like that. Or maybe when you're afraid, you notice that your hands are tensing up and they're getting sweaty, or your leg muscles, your thigh muscles are tensing, or your gut is tensing. And maybe you even have a little bit of like irritable bowel syndrome from your fear, and then learning to let that go. You have to become mindful of it first, then you let it go. And maybe you learn some relaxation techniques. And then when you're sad or when you're depressed, learning some coping strategies for that. Like what do you do when you're stuck in a depression or you're stuck in a sort of a lazy, unmotivated state and a sort of an apathetic state, or when you're feeling nihilistic and you feel like nothing matters and everything is meaningless and maybe you even want to kill yourself. What do? See, most people have not developed any of this stuff. This is not taught to you in school, of course. And yet think of how valuable it would be if you actually developed this kind of emotional mastery. Or with being happy. See? How do you be happy? Most people just are kind of winging it. They're doing stuff desperately to gain happiness, but it doesn't give them any happiness. All that happiness is fleeting. And yet they keep doing it over and over and again for the rest of their lives. And they're miserable and depressed when it doesn't work. So investing time researching what is happiness and then learning how to make yourself happy and how to maybe enjoy, how to be satisfied, building up that muscle, as I've talked about in my satisfaction meditation episode. That would be part of emotional mastery. You see, all of this would take you years and decades to develop. And you would have to work on it yourself, of your own initiative, because nobody's going to do this for you. You can't outsource it. And if you haven't developed this in the early part of your life, it's going to get harder to develop it later in life because you're going to build a lot of bad negative habits. You're going to build a lot of dysfunctional coping mechanisms for how to deal with your emotions. Then you're going to have double the work to unwire all those and then to wire in new ones in the future. So the earlier you do it, the better. And also, just it's going to pay dividends. You see, when you develop this emotional mastery, you're going to have the rest of your life to enjoy it, to enjoy a life that is not filled with a bunch of anxiety and panic attacks and fear and anger and jealousy and all this sorts of insecurity and victim mentality and bitterness and nihilism. So how much is emotional mastery worth to you? Is it worth $1 million? Is it worth $10 million? So how hard are you willing to work for it? Are you willing to work every single day for the next 20 years? Are you going to do it? See? And see, this is what determines the difference between a high quality person and a low quality person. A high-quality person is one who is going to work for the next 20 years to develop it and actually will develop it. And then that is what contributes to the quality of that person. Whereas the low-quality person is going to be lazy, is going to slack off, is not going to be consistent, is going to do it for one weekend and then is going to quit and go play video games and go jerk off and go smoke weed and go party with friends and go have a bunch of sex and do the easy life. And then before you know it, 20, 30 years will pass in that person's life and they will be 40 years old, 50 years old, and they will have nothing to show for it.